It's September 2nd, 1666. London, England. A bakery on Pudding Lane catches fire. It's a small fire. It shouldn't be a big deal. London has had fires before. But on this day, with strong winds, months of dry weather, and wooden buildings packed tightly together, that small fire becomes something unstoppable. The flames spread from house to house like they're following a map. Within hours, streets turn into furnaces. Within days, the medieval city of London, a place that had stood for over 1,000 years, is nearly erased. Within 5 days, more than 13,000 buildings are gone. Nearly 87% of the city inside the walls is destroyed. Homes, churches, shops, warehouses, records of entire lives reduced to ash. Thousands are homeless. Generations of memory vanish into smoke. The London people recognize, the London they thought was permanent, disappears. This is the Great Fire of London, the most devastating urban inferno Europe had ever seen. To understand how it became so catastrophic, you have to understand the city itself. London in 1666 was still medieval in its bones. Streets twisted unpredictably. Houses leaned over the road so far that neighbors could shake hands.
From upper windows, timber frames, tar, pitch, and thatch made construction cheap and fast, but also dangerously flammable. Workshops stored oil, coal, alcohol, gunpowder. It was basically a giant stack of kindling waiting for a spark. Fire prevention existed technically. Buckets, hooks, ladders. Citizens were expected to help.
In theory, buildings could be pulled down to create gaps the fire couldn't cross. In practice, demolishing property meant legal disputes about compensation. People hesitated. Delay is deadly in a fire. Add strong east winds, and hesitation becomes disaster. The year before had already broken the city. The Great Plague of 1665 killed tens of thousands. Trauma hung in the air. Commerce was fragile. Trust in institutions was thin. Londoners wanted stability, not another catastrophe. And then, just after midnight, Thomas Farriner's bakery ignited. Farriner was baker to the king, experienced, respected. His oven probably wasn't unusual. Many stayed warm overnight. Still, sometime after midnight, sparks caught. The family escaped through an upstairs window. A servant reportedly died. The fire crawled outward, slow at first, almost polite. Then the wind decided otherwise. By morning, flames leapt across alleys. Roofs ignited like match heads. Smoke rolled through lanes. So thick, people couldn't see the river. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, arrived. He saw buildings burning, but imagined it manageable. Supposedly, he muttered that a woman could put it out with a stream of urine. Then he went back to bed. Leadership, at the worst possible moment, blinked. While officials hesitated, physics did not. Heat intensified. Air fed the blaze. Once multiple houses burned together, they created firestorms, self-sustaining systems generating their own wind. Sparks flew hundreds of meters. The fire no longer moved street by street, it jumped, hunted, expanded. Residents fought back anyway. Buckets formed. Lines from wells in the Thames. Hooks ripped at walls. Gunpowder was used to blow up houses ahead of the flames, desperate attempts at creating barriers. But coordination was weak, and the inferno outran them. Imagine trying to stop a hurricane with furniture. Evacuation became inevitable. Families piled carts with whatever they could carry. Bedding, ledgers, silver, doors ripped from hinges. The wealthy hired boats and escaped by river. The poor fled on foot toward open fields outside the walls. Livestock wandered loose. Children cried. Property became meaningless. Survival was everything. On the third day, the heat reached monstrous levels. Lead melted and ran down streets like water. Glass exploded outward. Observers miles away reported feeling warmth on their faces. St. Paul's Cathedral, symbol of the city, seemed safe because it was stone, but the roof was timber, the scaffolding wood, the bookseller's stock in the crypt.
Highly combustible. When it caught, it burned magnificently. The cathedral collapsed into a glowing skeleton. Think about what that meant emotionally. If St. Paul's could burn, nothing could be trusted. The psychological dam burst. This wasn't a bad fire anymore. This was apocalypse. Commerce disintegrated as warehouses full of
Imports, tobacco, textiles went up in flames. Fortunes evaporated overnight. Credit systems froze. Merchants who had survived plague now faced bankruptcy. London was the economic heart of England. If the heart failed, what happened to the body? King Charles II eventually took stronger control. He authorized more aggressive demolitions. Soldiers
Helped create real fire breaks. Gradually, painfully, the advance slowed. By September 6th, the flames sputtered into isolated blazes, not because heroics triumphed, but because there was little left to burn. What remained looked lunar. Charred foundations, chimneys standing like broken teeth, smoke drifting for days. Around 100,000.
people homeless, roughly a fifth of the population. Official death counts were surprisingly low, maybe single digits, though many suspect the poor were simply not recorded. Bodies can vanish in heat like that. And then came the morning after. Shock turned into logistics. Where do you sleep tonight? How
Do you trade? Who owns what when landmarks are gone? Surveyors began mapping rubble. Tents and shacks filled more fields. Parliament debated reconstruction while refugees begged for bread. Here's where the story pivots from tragedy to transformation. Catastrophe creates possibility. Architects proposed radical redesigns, wide boulevards, grand plazas, rational grids.
Christopher Wren imagined a Baroque capital to rival Paris or Rome. Beautiful, impractical. Property rights, urgency, and cost crushed most dreams. Instead, London rebuilt on its old footprint, but with new rules. Brick and stone replaced timber. Building heights were regulated. Streets widened where possible. Infrastructure improved. It wasn't
Glamorous revolution. It was pragmatic evolution. Safer, stronger, slightly more modern. Money remained a nightmare. Who paid? Owners? Tenants? The crown? Lawsuits multiplied. People argued over centimeters of land invisible beneath soot. Yet construction roared ahead, because paralysis would mean decline. Laborers, masons, carpenters flooded in. Opportunity rose from
ruin. Psychology changed too. Citizens became fire conscious. Ladders, water access, escape routes, suddenly important. Out of this anxiety emerged something new: insurance. Companies offered protection in exchange for premiums. They even formed private brigades to fight fires at insured properties. Disaster birthed industry. Blame circulated wildly. Foreigners, Catholics, conspirators, fear loves a villain. A few unfortunate individuals paid with their lives despite thin evidence. Eventually, authorities nudged public opinion toward accident rather than plot. Stability required closure, even imperfect closure. Years passed. Buildings climbed upward. Markets reopened. Ships returned heavy with cargo. Children grew up in streets their parents remembered
as ash. Memory softened. Visitors admired the new London without grasping how violently it had been forced into existence. But under everyday life sat a permanent scar. Urban planning, regulation, emergency response, these were no longer abstract. They were survival tools. The fire dragged London out of medieval improvisation into managed modernity. So when people talk about resilience, this is what it looks like. Not heroism in the moment, but relentless rebuilding afterward. Negotiation, compromise, brick by brick refusal to disappear. The Great Fire didn't just destroy a city, it edited its future. Out of smoke came systems. Out of panic came policy. Out of unimaginable loss came a metropolis capable of dominating global trade and culture for centuries.
And that's the twist. Disaster, brutal and indifferent, ended up accelerating progress. London died as a medieval town and woke up, painfully, as something closer to a modern capital.